everyone. I'm excited today for our esteemed panel, Supply Chain and Standards in the U.S. We're honored to have here today 4 thought leaders on supply chain innovation. Starting out, Annelise Osborne, Chief Business Officer at Kadena. Ian Clark, Head of Product for Twin Supply Chain IOTA. Paul Rapino, Senior Vice President, Enterprise Business Development and Industry Standards at Hedera Foundation. And then finally, Dale Chrystie, Business Fellow, Blockchain Strategist at FedEx. So I want to start with asking a general overview question. What is the current landscape of the supply chain globally and the US more specifically? Starting with Annelise.
With me. I wouldn't kick that one down the line, but I think there's a lot of incredible use cases for blockchain within supply chain. So I'm really going to talk about 2 different categories of that, but generally I think blockchain you can actually use to track and trace, and also one of the issues with supply chain is the payments and money issues. So those I'll go into, but I'm going to let other folks answer these.
Thank you, Annelise. And I'll perhaps I'll bring the global perspective, if I may. So something we see, and we see this across many different nations, is supply chains still have way too much paper. The advanced ones have moved their paper to sending PDFs via email, far too many manual processes. And I sort of summarize that by nobody really has the data that they need, whether they're in industry, whether they're in government. If they do have the data they need, then they've worked really, really hard to get it. And what we're about is trying to make that easier, trying to make it improve trust and improve the security, so that organizations are happy to share data with their partners in industry and with the government agencies. And the idea behind that is to speed things up, increase trust, and also increase resilience. We've all been through COVID. We've all seen various impactful events, be that conflict, be that ships getting stuck in canals, that affect supply chains. They stop goods getting onto shelves. They stop food getting into countries. They affect the economies of countries. So there's so much that can be done to make all of that better, and that's one of the things we're looking at. Increase that resilience, increase the trust in the supply chain, and bring some digitalization. It's an area which has really been crying out for digitalization across a very, very long time.
To build on that, so since the start of what we call Web3 today, the big killer app was going to be supply chain, and we heard it, way back when. And to this day, everybody still thinks it's going to be the killer app, and we believe it too. And in my days at GBBC, we started working with BITA, and we'll get into that a little more detail. But the current state is as follows. I think people are still working on it. They really believe it's going to work. We found out what doesn't work, and we know what does work in DeFi and other models that are working today, and those two are going to start coming together in the next 5 to 10 years, where you're going to see a lot more of the financial piece of it, and you're going to see a lot more standards that are aligned, and then we're going to start seeing the use cases actually being scaled as opposed to being a proof of concept or point solutions.
I think this is the first time today we've talked about supply chains, so we've been putting up with all of these discussions today. Now hopefully you can put up with about 20 minutes of us. However, I would connect a bunch of dots. My brain connects dots here. Many of the same things that we've talked about all day long, which is essentially common languages that get you to standards, that get you to a number harmonized and interoperable solutions, that connects to private, public, that connects to regulatory. It's the same thing here. I would probably also argue that most people, while I've spent my entire career in supply chain and transportation, I don't think most people paid attention to it until the pandemic, when they couldn't get toilet paper or paper towels off the shelf. And now all of a sudden it's like, what's going on with those folks? Well, who knew that we'd become sexy all these years later, right? But all of a sudden, people have an opinion and care about what we're doing here. So during this panel, we'll talk about, again, things like standards. I work for FedEx. We go to 220 countries and territories. We go everywhere you can go. So does UPS, so does DHL. But my default position is the International Space Station. So he mentioned global. I would tell you at that level, looking down, there is no FedEx, there is no industry, there are no borders. The data that we've been talking about all day long knows no geographic borders. So while we're here in DC and we're talking about US, our default position is global. It's all gonna have to come together, whether that's the supply chain piece, the custodial piece, the standards piece, the financial piece, all the pieces we've been talking about all day long, this applies to all of them.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that overview. It's very insightful. So now going further along on the challenges, what challenges exist today that you see in the supply chain that blockchain and technology can mitigate or provide solutions for?
Start with me. We are working with so Kadena is a layer 1 proof of work chain, and we have different projects that have built upon us. So one of them actually addresses the digital product passport, which is regulation going into effect in the EU, which wants to track the lifespan of products from origination to, I don't want to say that, but the whole lifespan. And so BoomTag, actually, we've worked with, and they do, as of 2026, they're required to have this within textiles, and it actually is NFTs that track that through. So I feel like that's one problem that we're solving there. I think another problem that Bill Papp of Polymesh referred to up here is within the supply chain is payments, and one of them is factoring. There's a company called TCS, which actually is helping truckers, and so I actually spoke to a mom and pop trucker company as one of the clients there, and they actually save 35% of the cost of actually getting their payments in. Instead of waiting 60 days, they in essence sell their receivables, so trade receivables there, which is also supply chain based. We're working with 2 other projects also, or that I have worked with 2 projects that are really based on getting that money financing earlier, so I think that's an issue that we can help solve.
Thank you, Annelise. Perhaps if I just explain a little bit of the background, IOTA Foundation, who we are, what we're working on. We're a not-for-profit technology organisation based out of Europe. So our blockchain has been developed and continues to be developed for real-world adoption. And as part of proving that, we're part of a wider group of organisations, the Trade Worldwide Information Network, TWIN, and the aim of TWIN is to make some of those changes. So a set of open source technology which organisations can use themselves, or as Dale was mentioning, we get the standards right, they start to be able to share data with their partners across the supply chain far more easily than they can today, so building trust. So we work in that what's called the Twin Foundation with 5 other not-for-profit organisations, and to prove what we're saying, that real-world adoption, we've a number of examples of where that's being done. We initially started with a project in Kenya, working with the Kenya Revenue Authority and Kenyan government, and that links data from the Kenyan single trade window system, a single method of communicating with the Kenyan government and Kenyan government agencies about trade. It links that system with the supply chain organisations, the industry, and that's meant for fresh produce. We were able to show a trail of data and a shared, trusted trail of data from its source, and we've used that to reduce the paperwork and reduce the time scales for delivery of fresh product coming from Kenya into Europe. And of course, when you talk about fresh product, you reduce the time scales for delivery, then you increase the shelf life of that product. And then similarly, over the last sort of almost year, we've been doing a similar project within Europe. These are goods moving from European Union member states into the UK and vice versa. And again, starting from an industry perspective this time, enabling industry to share data and sharing data between the partners within industry, using Twin, which we describe as a digital interoperable pipeline, which is easy for me to say, but using that as the method of sharing data, we're allowing organizations to share that data so you know you're looking at the right version of the document. You're not looking at the one that was in your inbox and you missed the other one, which is the latest version. So everybody's looking at the same data, and that's enabled things as we've worked with government agencies. It's enabled the government agencies to better understand the goods that are being brought into the country, that are crossing the border, and that enables them to make their decisions earlier. So one government agency that we're working with is seeing data up to 20 hours earlier than they used to, and that's for a supply chain goods movement which is only 36 hours. So they have plenty of time to decide whether that's a set of goods that they need to look at or not. And just to sort of round that off, the last area, as I mentioned, Twin is a piece of open source software. It's also being used by some industry organizations, industry partnerships, one with interest around carriers, so shipping lines, etc. Another one with an interest around the port community. They all have the same problem. They don't have the same data. They don't have the right data or the data that they need. So they're also starting to use the technology.
Great, thank you so much. And go ahead, Paul.
So challenges, real quick. At Hedera Foundation, we work with 30 of our enterprise organizations that actually govern our ecosystem. And yesterday, Dale joined us and we had a roundtable. And the biggest challenge is everybody wants to do something, they don't know exactly what to do. So that's a big challenge. 2, there's 60,000 standards organizations that need to be aligned or at least understood and harmonized. So that's a challenge. 3 is getting the technology to actually work and scale. And then ultimately, even when we get these solutions in place, in order for them to go enterprise and go global, they've got to be able to be plugged into standard ERP or workflows of an enterprise. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I summarize it as this way. There's 2 big challenges. There's a big one and there's a little one. How do we get standards organizations together and aligned with government and regulation? And 2, how do we start building these use cases that eventually can get into the ecosystem and scale and mean something?
So back to the blockchain question, I've been in this, I led the first use case at FedEx in 2017 of blockchain, and maybe a year or so after that, one of my very favorite slides ever was a slide that said, blockchain is boring and useless. And it used to get a lot of nervous laughter at a blockchain conference. They paid good money for it, and it's like, what are we even talking about here? But as I would say, it's not, it's a lot of things. And we've met the OGs today, literally a couple of folks that are mentioned in the Bitcoin paper. So I say that with full respect, but I also want to draw the line, which is, we think it's going to, where authenticity matters, where provenance, where pedigree matters, we think it's going to be game-changing. And our founder, Fred Smith, we got him out on stage in 2018, early 2018 at Consensus, who just dropped a whole box of microphones and said, we think it's going to completely transform global supply chains. We still believe that. We still think that's the case. But again, it's not magic dust. You can't sprinkle a bunch of blockchain dust on something and it's going to grow 6 feet tall. Where it is really great and amazing, it's going to be in the authenticity, the provenance piece of that. And that's why it's so important, because you want to know, and I want to know, where the goods come from in our global supply chains. You want to know that, and it certainly connects over again into the finance and the DeFi and all the other discussions we've had today, but that's the importance of blockchain. It's not even the B word, it's actually when we get it to digital, that's, we're going to get harmonized and interoperable standards, then we get to open, then we get to digital. It's digital, that's the holy grail. Once we get to digital, we get to blockchain, we get to digital identity, we get to a number of things, but it's not just about the B word.
Thank you. So I'm hearing a lot on adoption of technology, but also standards. So leading to my third question here on how is amenable a traditional supply chain participants to the adoption of blockchain technology and the use of harmonized standards?
I would think we have to prove you can either make money or save money using blockchain. We're all running businesses. And adding on to the use case of of supply chain being the killer case, it's really back office transactions, right? It really can help with back office operations, including payments. And I think that's where there's opportunities to save money. And so that I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you, Annelise. And you're absolutely right. It is about proving to industry that there is value to be released, and we can prove that, and we do prove that on a very regular basis. And I think there's a mix, as sort of Dale mentioned just now. There's a set of tools that are now becoming available to us. Industry see the value. It doesn't take a very long conversation with an industry player to show them what's possible, to show them the benefits of sharing data and how their organisation can benefit from that, how they increase trust, how they reduce their cost, how they reduce their risk. So they see that very, very quickly. The will is there. Organisations have been bitten by similar ideas in the past. It's about proving that this is the time when it can be done.
Yeah, I'll just build on what I said a few minutes ago. These Dell, Google, IBM, we meet with all these companies and they know something is there. They just got to start figuring out what part of their ecosystem they can start building in. But the bigger issue is, again, how do they scale it across? How do they get buy-in in the enterprise to actually place this bet that may be 5 years away or 10 years away? And then ultimately, does it work? So we can prove in, like I said earlier, point solutions or one-off point proof of concepts, but once that is ready for production, there's a lot of concern at the enterprise level that is this ready to go? So that's one of the big challenges they're looking at as well.
I think one of our challenges, I'm on the business and strategy side, I'm not on the technical side, but I think there are very few CEOs or C-suite that want to talk tech. You know, we're wasting our time if we're trying to talk about hashing or anything else you want to talk about. These are C-suite folks. They're responsible for risk and opportunity, and they have fiduciary responsibilities. And I think it's incumbent upon us to be bilingual. We have to be fluent in both languages. So if I'm talking to the chief financial officer, I may have the conversation, what about your average days outstanding? It's X number of days. If we could help reduce that 5% or 10%, would you be interested in that? Would that be something helpful for you? And now you have their full attention. Well, I don't have to explain to them whether that's an agentic smart contract or whatever the case may be behind the scenes, because they're responsible for reducing those types of things, and other C-suite around the side, whether that's the legal officer, the innovation officer, or others. We have to speak that language if we want this thing to move forward. They have to understand, I've got annual goals, I've got things I have to accomplish, this is important to me, I've got kids to put through school, whatever their example, whatever their motivating factors are, that's the piece we have to talk about, because if the longer we talk tech, I think we're simply delaying that. I think it's a hype cycle kind of a thing, and none of us want that to be the case. We want to figure out good use cases that are valid, that people can commit and get behind.
Great, thank you. So we are running to 5 minutes, and I wanted to ask each of you your final parting words and advice to the audience here on what the audience needs to know on supply chain, U.S. innovation leadership, and one thing you want them to take away from this panel today.
Sure, I think there's a lot of money to be saved using blockchain in the operation and supply chain space. But I also want to put out there that we can make it a Web 2-like experience with Web 3 behind the scenes plugged in, because you don't want it to be clunky. So there are absolutely ways to do that nobody needs to talk about blockchain. It's just become more efficient.
Okay, thank you. I think perhaps in one line, we're all in this together. So my definition of supply chain is all the organisations involved in a goods movement, whether you're an industry organisation, whether you're a technology partner, whether you're a government organisation, you all have some very similar problems. If we work together, if we understand each other's viewpoints, each other's needs. There's a set of tools now that we have available to us that will enable us to meet those needs and make things better for everyone. Industry saves money, government improves its tax revenue perhaps, or improves compliance, or controls the products that comes into a country more effectively than it's able to do today.
I told Sandra when I left GBBC that I wouldn't stop selling. So the one thing I want you to remember is stay involved in GBBC. These work groups really, really matter. 4 or 5 years ago, we started the sustainability with Jackson Ross and John, who's here, Devados, and Microsoft and others, Accenture, with the idea that unless we call things the same thing, called taxonomy, it's going to be hard to explain to people what you're doing, and especially in this world. So we modeled the value of frameworks to develop token taxonomy framework and token development. A lot of words, but we're demonstrating that actually works. Then we brought that same model through BITA into the supply chain. So we're really working on the standards and the frameworks, and we've got to do both. So we need help on these groups continuing to drive, and then you'll see on Friday, I guess tomorrow, a lot more work on the financial services framework. But the vision, I would say, is look at DeFi, look at finance. It'll all follow the money, because at the end of the day, once these are connected, the value will be there. So keep your eye on DeFi, on financial services, and how that money is transacting, how the regulation's supporting it, and you'll see that eventually hit supply chain, and then I think we'll be in good shape.
For 3,000 years or so, we've had the concept of trade, and it started off with somebody having a tapestry and somebody else having a canoe and somebody else being on the other side of the river. And that's what created this proxy of trust that exists today, where carriers and logistics and everybody moves things. And that started off with some, clay tablet or wood tablet or papyrus and later paper. And little by little, as this has become a global, phenomenon here, it may take several dozen documents to get something around the world. We don't note it as consumers. We just show up and buy the paper towels off the shelf or whatever the case may be. But I would tell you that we are at a historic moment in time. In all of human history, we are at a unique moment. And I think it's noteworthy that we're in this amazing facility that's almost 100 years old. FDR was in this room. NAFTA was signed in this room. I did my homework. I went to Wiki. I learned all kinds of things. But I would also tell you, with all of what we've listened to today, GBBC was in this room in 2025. This group and these leaders and these experts were here in 2025, and so 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, we're also going to be able to look back and go, we were part of that history. So what's the history? For the last 3,000 years, we've used a proxy of trust that is some kind of representation, paper or whatever the case may be. So the rearview mirror is paper. It's 4 dozen documents to get you something from China all the way through all these kinds of things. The windshield is digital. The windshield, what we're going to see, somebody born today is going to grow up in a paperless global supply chain, a digital supply chain, and it fits in with all of what everybody else has talked about all day long. The financial piece, the regulatory piece, all of that stuff, that's what's in the realm of the possible. And once we digitize, we will be able to digitalize. We will be able to completely rethink these processes where they aren't delayed by paper crossing borders. Your identity, your digital identity, will get it as a trusted shipper or a trusted receiver. It will move not at the physical speed, but at the speed of data. And that's what we've been talking about all day long, and you're going to see that from a global supply chain moving forward. And this is that historic moment. Behind us is one thing, and the future is right in front of us.
Great. Thank you so much. And big round of applause for the audience, for the panelists. Thank you.